The question is, what can we do as an international community when the so-called three solutions, durable solutions to the protracted refugee situations do not work? Repatriation, voluntary repatriation, local integration, and resettlement in a third country, which is usually in a northern country.
I think the point that you make, Derek, is very much the challenge of trying to find solutions within this limited framework of humanitarian options. And the three durable solutions is humanitarian language for the solutions that we would want to find for refugees when situations external to humanitarian realities present themselves. So in the best case scenario, when there is peace, refugees can go home. When there's cooperation in the host state, they can be locally integrated. When there's political will outside, they can be resettled. A fourth option that's come up is this question of migration options, which has a number of us quite concerned. The idea of labor migration as another opportunity for refugees to find work. I think the way that it's generally understood is that in a number of situations, for example, with Afghans in Pakistan, there are between 2 million, 2.4 million Afghans in Pakistan. Roughly half of them live in camps, roughly half of them live in urban areas. Those in urban areas have been economically productive for a very, very long time. So I think the migration language can be useful in saying, have a certain number of refugees found de facto solutions that we can try and make de jure through other means. I think that's one step. More generally, I would say, and very briefly, that these other kinds of opportunities, repatriation, local integration, resettlement, can be leveraged when we engage with the non-humanitarian actors. When I mean non-humanitarian, I don't mean that they're unpleasant, but that they're not within the humanitarian community. So linking up with development, linking up with peace building, we may see some marginal increases, but I think we'll start to build momentum. And this is if we look at the big cases historically of Sarefka, of the CPA, of the camp clearances in Europe after the Second World War, there have been occasions where there are times where they always look unsolvable, but the impetus to find solutions is never exclusively within the humanitarian community. So I would argue that's the way forward.
With regards to the issue of choice, I think, and first of all, I wanted to reiterate and just to emphasize, post-World War II, we found solutions, right? There were many, many, many refugees. We were able to resettle as a global community all of those refugees. So, and I think one of the arguments we're making now is that we may be there, right? We may be at that same kind of point now. So we need really creative and generous solutions to this. I guess choice, maybe I think I was talking about voice for refugees, or giving refugees, asking, in fact, it follows up from what James was saying. We need ideas, about how to address this. And we can throw ourselves into this as academics and policymakers, and, you people here are academics and you will have ideas. But we also need to ask the people who are in the situation themselves and not only ask them, but it was raised earlier today, Janet Dench, who's here from Canadian Council on Refugees, not only ask refugees, but also engage them in the process of finding the solutions. So of trying to figure out how do we move ahead.
I think I have a slightly different angle on it, and I'd like to answer the question in a little bit of detail. If you take Somali camp, Dadaab, or Kakuma, which I've lived in both of them, and you have to disaggregate the problem. There it's not a case that they can't return. There's no ethnic problem. There is a divide between Noyer and Dinka, etc., in southern Sudan, but basically they can go home if there's peace. The same with the Somalis, and they can go home to Puntland and Somaliland where there's relative peace. The problem is in southern Somalia. But you disaggregate the problem and you find a lot of the ones aren't going home to Somaliland or Puntland because of the way the economy of the camps are structured and the economy of costs of returning people, and they don't get returned. You find that, in fact, people are staying in camps so their kids can get educated, because if they took them home, they wouldn't get educated. And if you provided a facility for them to get educated, they would return. So there's various factors. There are people who will stay in the camp who are older because they're better off in a welfare system in a camp than anywhere else. So you disaggregate that kind of problem where they can return, and you find different solutions for different groups of people, and you can find solutions. When it's a case that they can't return and they can't settle, which isn't the case in Afghanistan. For instance, in the study of Afghanistan, the problem is a peace problem, because with the Pashtuns, the problem goes to an old division of where part of Afghanistan effectively went by the British, where they drew the line, to Pakistan. And there's a whole fear in Pakistan of too many Pashtuns living within Pakistan in these unregulated territories. So these are political, ethnic problems that have to be solved on a much bigger level. But for half the refugees, there's no going home. And you mentioned after the Second World War, it wasn't true we resettled them all. After all, if you think about the millions that happened, of the 13 million Germans forced back out of countries, ethnically cleansed under an international good thing to do from all kinds of countries, including Czechoslovakia, and 1 million Germans died in the process. They were forcefully returned to Germany that was totally devastated. The Jews were left in the camps until Israel was formed. It wasn't until 1948 that they were allowed to go out. You in fact had very closed-minded people, and at other times we've had terrific expressions of taking people in. And if you say, well, it's not you have 125,000 spaces, it's not enough. If you're going to take 2.5 million people, have to be resettled, and you're not going to lie about it and say we're going to do something about protracted refugee situations, you have to say we have to resettle 2.5 million people. If you divide it in 10 years and you divide it up among the countries, it means Canada taking in about 25,000 a year, if it's going to really do anything. Otherwise, it's a fraud and a lie. We do tokenism, and that's what we do. And we use a kind of language, we find burden sharing, we find all kinds of ways of obfuscating the issue without really tackling it and say, we've got to stand up to the plate. And unless we do that, it'll persist, no matter what all the rhetoric is about. And the fact is, Canada has in the past done it. When we took the Indo-Chinese refugees, we took, in the first year, we took 60,000, not 25. And all we would have to take is 25,000. Now we're a much wealthier country. When we took the Hungarians, we took over 4 months. We took 37,000. So we can do it. There's no difficulty in doing it. It's just a matter of saying, are the population supportive of it? Are we willing to do it? Are we willing to develop the strategy? Are the civil servants working on this to create the policies and convince the political leaders? Are the NGOs putting the pressure that we do something about it and face it, that we have to do it? Because nobody else is going to do it if we don't do it.